Okay, well, I wanted to do a little something different, because I was kind of perusing YouTube as a whole to see if this game turned up anywhere, and honestly, you just don't see presence of it anywhere. It's almost as if this is just I would call it a hidden diamond in the rough, not even so much a gem for the N64. One thing over the many advantages that Sony had over Nintendo at the time, it's that there were no role-playing games, true RPGs with experience and things like that to be found. We had nothing, and for the longest time leading up to my acquisition of the N64, and I was subscribed to Nintendo Power at the time, was this game, Aidyn Chronicles, the first Mage. So much hype was built around this game. It was going to be the thing that Quest 64 wasn't, because that was just a giant letdown. But I just want to hop right into it and just get going. One thing I just want to point out is that these mid-game cinematics play at a beautiful, like almost unheard of 60 frames a second on the N64 natively. This is not being boosted in any way by the emulation. This is, from what I remember, exactly how it plays out. But this game, on the whole, is it's not, as you can see, very graphically impressive, but the engine behind it is very ambitious, almost to the point where it makes you wonder, maybe, especially when you're seeing in a higher resolution, where you're seeing textures that would have otherwise been heavily compressed at 480i or whatever the native resolution was for the N64 at the time, but you can see the textures in their full detail. I definitely think that it being the swan songs, so to speak, for the N64 toward the end of its life cycle, I feel like the code was already written. It would have been more primed and much more. Look at that fire flow, even in its lack of detail. It would have served better to be a GameCube title with full voice acting and all the bugs worked out, because getting towards the end of the game, it's very clear that this was rushed. There's grammatical errors, jumps in story that don't make any sense, but out of every RPG from my childhood, I think this was my first true grindy type RPG, because I, of course, owned the N64 and not the PlayStation. There's really, by today's standards, a very generic run-of-the-mill sort of storyline about an orphan who turns into a prodigy, whatever, but the story beats here are actually quite interesting, so much to the point where I wrote a this is embarrassing, a 500-page fan fiction about the characters in this story, because there are just so many shades of characters here. You've got your brute, you've got your bard, you've got your prodigy, your several love interests. Very interesting game, very layered, but also on the other side, very generic. It's this, it balances itself out to the point of so mad that it's fascinating. The levels of, well, just outright blandness that it achieves by hitting so many great notes and so many bland notes all at the same time. But this is Aidyn Chronicles, the first Mage for the N64. I'm going to play it until I absolutely can't stand it anymore, because I know that it is grindy and buggy as all get out. And I'm not in the least bit worried about Content ID for this, because again, THQ is essentially defunct and is more or less a branding now. So I don't think that there's any THQ YouTube bots hiding out in the wings waiting for me. But I want more exposure for Aidyn Chronicles, the first Mage. I certainly feel like it's a universe or property worth picking up and revisiting again, because the world and rules and lore in it are just so intriguing. But here we go. and you know, to unfinished animation there. Even though with this being the very first cutscene of the game, just even that little shadow animation is obviously unfinished, as it does not move as it approaches the wall. And I find that humorous. Definitely not the bad guy. But that's the end of the first cinematic, and frame rate immediately drops. Well below what is standard at the time, as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner of the 20 frames a second that you generally see on an N64 game. The engine itself is just overly ambitious because, for one, this game's world is massive, and unlike a lot of big open world games at the time, there are things to do and there aren't things to do, but at any given time, this entire game's map is loaded. There are no load screens in this game that I know of, except for in between cutscenes. But God, that frame rate is just unbearably bad. But there is some really good texture work, a lot of hard rough edges with the polygons, but you can tell in places that towards the end of the project they were getting ambitious enough to kind of move away from the N64 and go to the GameCube, but something just fell through somewhere, and of course there's just not enough press coverage. I've done the digging, but one can assume that this game was going to move away from the N64 to the GameCube. There's even there was a small Reddit thread talking where sort of cult fans like myself of this game, and goblins, yes, you're already getting a taste of what typical RPG fare that you're in for. And then you have your sort of dwarf knockoffs. They're called Merari. I have to find Kindle. Just this big, giant exposition dump so far into the game, and it's funny because he's like, oh, where's the wizarding school? And it's funny because Elrond wants to be a wizard and a knight at the same time, and just it's funny that he's so oblivious, and it's obviously an exposition dump for the audience. Poker roll. Is it expensive? Yeah, I have one gold piece, only one. And I think if you listen closely, I'm just gonna be quiet. You can actually hear the money leave your inventory. Yeah, it's funny, you know, they give you that one gold piece for that exchange of that piece of spice, which will appear in your inventory. Don't be in the woods after dark. Not see him alive again. And they all speak like Yoda, which is funny because they're green. But I can just end this whole thing outright, I think, by going in this direction. Here, you get a little taste of the combat system. It's very methodical. You know, it has that Quest 64 vibe where everything is sort of, your movement is delegated. You can do whatever you want up until your turn is over. This is completely turn-based, but live-action turn-based at the same time. Very strategic in the way that you do things, and I'm just going to admit from the outset that I am going to cheat, because just the grinding in this game can be so arduous. And when I first started playing it, I was on ADD medicine, and it made it much, much easier and bearable, but yeah, here we are. Here's the scroll system. This also runs at 60 frames a second, which I find interesting, but yeah, the cheat down there at the bottom has just given me this massive amount of experience, so we're just going to we're gonna max everything out. We have I think my XP is actually going up as I use. I don't even know what's going on. I think I've just completely broken the game with the game shark cheats that are included here, but we're just gonna increase our stats up to as high as they'll go, because I don't want any sort of interference going forward. I just want to, you know, expose the game as best I can. But to the patient, this is really a true D&D type experience. It really is. There's all kinds of stats that are affecting things behind the scenes. For the time, it's really innovative. The rain affects it. The day and night cycles affect everything. Your dexterity, your stamina. It's just so D&D heavy. think that's about it for the skills that we have at the time. And I think the game crashed. I think I broke it. Yeah, that didn't go as planned at all. Whatsoever. Just gonna kind of backtrack a little bit. I'm not exactly sure what I broke, but I'll just I remember that seeing that crash screen a lot whilst playing the game on the original N64. That black screen of death with the green and yellow text, as if it was still in debug mode. We'll skip this cutscene again, so we don't have to see it again. And back again to 10 frames a second. God, this is just unplayable. If you do decide to pick up this game, play it strictly for the story. Strictly for the story. But let's see. If I had to make a comparison, it is broken in the same way that that if you know who Pro Jared is, he talks about Two Worlds. I feel the same sort of nostalgic letdown from this as he felt with Two Worlds, with all the promises beforehand and just that true pure D&D experience that you were supposed to get from Two Worlds and Two Worlds 2. That'd be the most redundant title of all time. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure how to navigate that cheat system there without breaking the game. I'd really love to get past into this intro sequence and get at least 30 minutes of footage and save and just come back to it later. Or maybe even dive right into one of my older saves here. And again, full disclosure, I do have the cartridge for this game. It's a nice sleek black. Very unique for the N64 unless you had like a WWE game, but every combat situation is unique depending on where you're at. Like in this forest area, you always know what sort of terrain you're in. I think this game would have been better served perhaps as a maybe an actual. It is what it is, but it would have been better perhaps as a true real-time RPG where you played one character at a time. But that again would eliminate the party system. But I think modern times, so no, I don't. I'm going to go through the game like for realsies. I at least have the maximum gold cheat. Yeah, that gold that's going to be there. I just want to get through to the meat of the story, and all you really need to do is find Kendall's hat. And there's a lot of cool story elements here. Don't want to spoil anything, but you have the spirit that follows you everywhere, and it kind of just gives you breadcrumbs as you're playing. And you know, you have your journal entries, you have insights into Aileron as a character. I saw a strange spirit in the forest. You can there's camping. There's season cycles, which there's just so many things at play that change how you interact with the game. And then there's a lot of scripted events, things that you can't really bypass. And here's a portal. There's a fast travel system in this game. I think that this game was a little bit too big for its britches, but we're just going to bypass the forest in its entirety, because if you try to leave the forest, that's when you trigger this goblin encounter. And this becomes... Yellow! And of course, everything that's a monster that speaks to you speaks in broken English, and I feel like I'm watching a storyboard for a game. I feel, because like you see, he's slowly getting surrounded, and he realizes it's an ambush. But I feel like I'm watching a storyboard, like a rough idea of what it could have been. And of course, this is a scripted fight. You just get hit twice and die. So, and there he goes. Down he goes. But it burns. Here's our introduction to Oriana, who is the forest healer. Where am I? And there's Witch, and it's funny because I feel again like this is a storyboarding. It's full of spice and herbs. You must be a witch. Witches. There's so many clashes again in the story. Again, it's a very rich story, but it feels like a mishmash of a lot of ideas that were trying to come to fruition, but never quite did. I saw the hat. Yeah, and you picked it up in the inventory, and you should be in theory wearing it, but there's a lot of contradictory story elements in this game, where because it's later in the game it's established that he frequently visits this woman in the woods, and in fact he's chastised about it once he gets back to the castle. But I always thought this was interesting, sort of this spiritual plane, and if you'll just take a second, just listen to this music. This music still haunts me, and I'm 27 years old. Just this very simple violin crescendo, isn't it? Cadence, whatever the proper musical term is. It's just always haunted me. Very, very masterful for what they had at their disposal. And here in this sequence, the game runs at 60 frames a second because, of course, there's a big void of nothing. Dropping, of course, as soon as characters come into frame, but still moving at a nice above 20 frames a second. I just find it funny that these characters, like this one woman is trying to reach out to you, and then the monsters are like, they're essentially fucking everything up. Again, it feels like a storyboard sequence. It's unpolished and unfinished, but look at the texture work on this one particular monster, the Chaos Scout, the thing with one eye. If you'll just look at the detail on the texture, way more than what the N64 can handle, but through emulation, you can see these textures uncompressed. But I think I'll leave it at that. We'll save, and just a short little video. I just wanted to sort of touch on screw it. Just touch on my history with this game. If you haven't heard of Aidyn Chronicles, I think you should check it out and definitely give it a chance, especially if you're a hardcore D&D RPG fan and you have a lot of patience or on a lot of ADD mess. But anyway,